first one in the ministry, you have these grandiose sort of bogus ideas of what ministry is going to be like, and then you realize after 5-10 years, it's not working out like I thought it was going to work out. My perspective has changed. And I have to realize that I'm in this for the long haul, even when things don't go my way, and most of the time it seems like it's professed Christians who will disappoint you more than non-Christians. I think back now, over the nearly 40 years, it's been mostly Christians that have disappointed, or professed Christians, I'll put it that way. And sometimes you're not sure about some of them. But they're professing Christ, and they've disappointed me greatly. And I can't get dragged down by that, but I will continue to stand lovingly and in the truth. When you stand on the truth, then the enemy is going to come at you hard and swift. If they don't curse you to your face, they'll somehow break your heart. So a willingness to take a stand and even suffer for the truth. Number 6. A sixth principle is I have a commitment. I think the Bible teaches we need to have a commitment to build a plurality of, ultimately in the church, a plurality of male godly leaders. That doesn't mean that women aren't leaders. I'm not saying that, because we have women leaders in our church. But they work under the authority of a group of men. I'm not even the leader. I mean, I'm one of the elders, but in the way we run things, there's no way that I'm the one and only guy. It's not. I mean, I'm slapped down several times for something. Maybe it's something I want to do. The group doesn't want to do it, and I have to, work within a group. And sometimes we've had some, really hard discussions on something, and I'm learning about them, and they're about me, and we're learning to work together, and it is coming along. It's become a joy, and yet sometimes it's a struggle, because you've got, in our case, 5 different men. Sometimes, not oftentimes, for the most part, we all have the same perspective, but sometimes we might not. Even in a marriage, those of you who are married, you know that you can love your wife, and sometimes you can be very much opposed to on a given issue with one another. That's just the way it is, because we're all sinful. When you put 2 people who are sinners together, that's what happens. And so you have to always remember the principles of forgiveness and God's grace and speaking the truth, and yet continue to love one another. And so, but a principle in the church is this desire to build male godly leaders. I served in Kansas City at a church that called, when I attended Calvary Bible College, and they knew me there, and there was this church in the Kansas City area that was looking for somebody to come and teach the Word. This church had been through a lot of problems and issues, and when I went there, I said, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to be focused on these 3 things: evangelism, discipleship, and developing male leadership. Now this church, I'm going to tell you, was part of the American Baptist Church organization. Right? Do you know anything about the American Baptist Church? For the most part, they got a lot of baggage. And in this particular church, when I went there, they really wanted me to come. And when I said that, I was candidating there, and I really had some reservations about this, but I wanted to move to Kansas City because my kids lived there. It wasn't really. But I shared that with the church, and they all cheered. There's about 100 of them. They stood up and cheered me like I was a rock star when I said I wanted to build male leadership, because that church was being run by mostly women. In fact, it had like 6 different committees, and all the committees were headed up by women. They didn't have an elder board or a deacon board. The church was run by committee. And I knew that was going to be a problem, but they said that they wanted to change. Okay, I'll come and help you change. And I began teaching the Word and doing different things. I began to try to get men to come in on Saturday morning discipleship time. We were going through some, like, we started off doing Jerry Bridges' books, some of his books. You can't go wrong with any book that Jerry Bridges has written. Well, the guys who I was looking to target got angry and they didn't want to show up. And I found out that that church didn't really want to change. They wanted, the men were content to let the women rule that church. And I was only there 11 months. I realized after 6 months, this is not working out. And then one day I got called in, and this was in July of 2015, and I was going to be called into the committee of they called it the Pastoral Relationship Committee. This is the committee that deals with any issues with the pastor that need to be dealt with. Well, they called me in and basically said, the church isn't growing and it's your fault, and the things that you're doing are causing strife. I said, well, look, when I came here, I said I was going to do these 3 things, and you affirmed me. In fact, you cheered me like I was a rock star. And those are the things I've been doing. Now you say you don't want to do those things anymore. Well, so basically that night I turned my resignation in, having been there. At that point it was about 10 months, because then I had another month still, and that was the hardest month of my life, knowing that everyone knew that I had resigned, and we were just working through our departure. But that church really struggled. In fact, that church, since I left, has gone through 2 more pastors. 2 more pastors. They were both there longer than me. They both lasted about 1.5 years, 2 years apiece. I just kind of like smile. It's like, anyway. But I have a commitment to build, because God's program is for men to lead. And when men, like in that church, don't want to lead, they're violating God's program. Because unqualified leaders are deadly. The church is not about a dictatorship, and the church is not a democracy. They were trying to run it as a committee-run democracy. The church is not a dictatorship, neither is it a democracy. It's elder-led. That's different than democracy or dictatorship. And so, godly leaders are called to lead the godly church, a church into godliness. Number 7, watching the clock here, I got about 12, but I won't get through them all. A 7th key principle that affects spiritual changes, there has to be a high standard of holiness. A high standard of holiness. In other words, it goes back to the whole idea of the depth of the church. Focus on the depth of the church. And when you focus on holiness, when you focus on some of these points, by the way, they overlap, admittedly. But my holiness, your holiness, is the key tool for outreach. In other words, when a people see that our lives are distinctly different, well, MacArthur phrased it like this. I'll just quote him, because he says, the greatest, most powerful element of evangelism is not technique, it's not some marketing strategy, it's not some cultural relevance, it's the power of a transformed life. In other words, holiness in my life and in your life is if my life is not Christ-like, then it doesn't matter what I say or what I do to try to influence people. My life is unholy. They're not going to. I'm a hypocrite, or I'm a fraud, or I'm not really a follower of Christ. And so, holiness of life, a high standard of holiness. But what you see today is people want to get alongside the world churches want to get alongside the world or become like the world so that the world is not threatened by them. In other words, a church will say, we want to be a seeker-sensitive church, or we want to be this kind of church. We want to be a non-threatening kind of church. So if you have a holy life, that's kind of a threat. So have sort of a weird life, and maybe you'll draw people into you because you're kind of like them. There's an illustration. It goes way back before a lot of you. Back in March of 1992, when we were still over in Germany, there was in People magazine, there was an article written by somebody by the name of Sister Paula. Now, Sister Paula described herself, quote, as an open transsexual Christian preaching the gospel. So Sister Paula was actually born Larry Nielsen. And basically the point is, this Sister Paula wanted to basically reach out to transsexual, LGBT type folks in a non-threatening way. So Sister Paula thought he or she, whatever he was or she was, with his kind of ministry or her kind of ministry was the best approach to reaching these kinds of people. In other words, become like the world in order to reach the world. You see, what I'm saying is it's just the opposite. A holy life will be your distinctive mark, and that holy life becomes a basis for evangelism. Not becoming like in the extreme case of Sister Paula or anything, not even that extreme. In other words, I want my life, as I follow Christ, to make a difference. James says friendship with the world is enmity with God. So we win the world by becoming like Christ. Let your light so shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So it's a holiness of life. Well, I'm seeing my time is getting close to the end here. But if I had further time, I would talk about doctrinal clarity in a church. I would say that we need to have clearly defined and cohesive theology in our churches. Paul says, examine everything carefully, hold fast to that which is good. Or, as was read in Ephesians 4, we are no longer to be children tossed here and there by every wind of doctrine. So there must be doctrinal clarity. And then there also must be a strong emphasis on discipleship. That's another key principle. Or an active people using their gifts. And an intense loving spirit. These are all kind of concepts that produce spiritual change. I want to take the principles of Scripture that produce change and embrace those, and not the things of the world. Well, I hope this has been helpful to you this morning. I actually have a lot more here. Actually, altogether in my notes here, I have 19 points in my grocery list, but you got the most important ones, I think, this morning. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, thank you for your grace. Thank you, Lord, that you moved in our hearts and you drew us to yourself, and that you are creating Christ in every one of us. I pray that each of us, in the spheres that we run and live in, that we might be your instruments to point others to Christ. Use our lives for your glory. Use this school to sharpen and prepare its students to be your tools. Thank you again for these moments together and for the time that we can worship you in Jesus' name.